Each dawn brought a familiar chill that gripped the village nestled between the towering hills, where the sun struggled to break through the gloomy clouds. For Amelia, the girl who had learned the art of survival in this unforgiving landscape, waking up was often a battle against the weight of despair. Her bed, more like a nook of straw and torn blankets, was her only refuge, yet it was a stark reminder of her solitude. On this particular morning, Amelia stirred awake to the faint sounds of the village coming to life. She listened intently, allowing the gentle cacophony of clucking hens and the distant clanging of metal to drown out her thoughts. Today, she decided, would be different. With a renewed sense of determination, she dressed quickly in the worn clothing she had pieced together, her fingers brushing over its frayed edges as if they could weave new hope into the fabric. Amelia stepped outside, the thin layer of frost crunching like broken glass under her bare feet. She inhaled, deeply. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Today, she would seek something beyond mere survival. She would search for purpose within the confines of her world. Perhaps she would visit old Widow Hargrove, who often spoke of herbs and healing, knowledge that could be the key to more than just nourishment. As she walked the narrow path winding through the village, her confidence wavered briefly. The villagers, with their wary glances and hushed whispers, reminded her of her isolation. They avoided her as if she were a shadow that darkened their homes. Yet Amelia steeled herself. If she could not weave connections with others, she would carve her own destiny. Arriving at Widow Hargrove's small cottage, the scent of dried flowers wafted through the air. Knocking timidly on the weathered door, she was greeted by the elderly woman's warm yet curious gaze. "Ah, the little orphan. What brings you here?" She spoke, her voice a comforting melody amidst the uncertainty of Amelia's life. "I wish to learn," Amelia blurted out, surprising even herself with the boldness of her words. "About herbs and healing." Widow Hargrove studied her for a moment, her piercing eyes filled with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. "Healing, you say? It's not magic, child. It requires knowledge, patience, and perhaps even a touch of love." Amelia nodded, her heart racing. She had known love too little since her parents passed, but she felt an ember of it igniting within her as she spoke. "I am willing to learn." And so began the most transformative chapter of Amelia's life. Each day spent in the widow's garden, listening to stories of remedy and care, was an escape from despair. She discovered the hidden power of the world around her, how to turn the simple dandelion into a brew for strength, or how the delicate chamomile could soothe a troubled mind. With each lesson, she felt layers of her heart unfurl, revealing a yearning not just for survival, but for growth, connection, and a place in a world that had so often turned its back on her. In these moments, her dreams transformed. No longer did she only wish for food or shelter. Now she desired to be a beacon of hope for others, an orphan turned healer, perhaps even someone who could weave a tapestry of belonging amidst the barren threads of her current existence. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets as she rummaged through the remnants of yesterday's market. The fragrant aromas of fresh bread and ripe fruits wafted through the air, teasing her senses and heightening her hunger. Her fingers, calloused and worn, sifted through the discarded scraps, each piece a small treasure, a symbol of survival. In this chaotic marketplace, life thrived amid the forgotten and overlooked, a dance of hope and despair. As she leaned over a half-empty crate, lost in the quest for something, anything edible, a figure stepped into her periphery. She looked up, startled. He was tall, with a commanding presence that made his finely tailored clothes seem even more pronounced against the backdrop of her tattered dress. His shirt, a crisp white, contrasted dramatically with the rich emerald of his waistcoat, which hugged his frame perfectly. The gentleman's shoes gleamed like polished obsidian, an odd sight amidst the dirt and grime that clung to the street underfoot. "Searching for hidden gems, I see," he remarked, his voice smooth and rich. "Like dark chocolate." It was a tone that wrapped around her like a soft blanket, igniting an ember of interest within her. She could feel her heart quicken, caught off guard by his sudden approach and easy charm. "It's all I can do." Her reply was cautious. She had learned never to trust too freely, yet something about the way he smiled, teeth white and even, eyes sparkling with mischief, pulled her in like a moth to a flame. "People toss away more than you think." He chuckled softly, a sound she wished could fill the air for longer than a moment, and took a step closer. "Ah, but sometimes it takes the discerning eye to reveal true value. May I assist you?" His hands gestured graciously as if he were offering her a choice between a platter of fine delicacies. She studied him, searching for any hint of malice. "Why would you want to help me?" Her voice was cautious, but curiosity sharpened her tone. There was kindness in his eyes, but she had learned that kindness often hid ulterior motives, particularly in a world that had been anything but kind to her. "Why not?" His response was almost too quick, too rehearsed. "It's a good day to share fortune, wouldn't you agree?" He held her gaze, and in that moment, an intoxicating blend of hope and dread washed over her. Perhaps he held the key to a different life, a way out of the hunger that gnawed at her insides. Yet, beneath his charming demeanor, something darker flickered in the depths of his eyes, a shadow that sent a chill down her spine. Could she trust him? The lines between hope and danger blurred in her mind, caught in the gravitational pull of his presence. Could this be the opportunity she had longed for, or a trap disguised as a lifeline? Faced with unspoken choices, she wrestled with her own instincts, knowing full well that every encounter was fraught with consequence. The flickering candlelight cast playful shadows across the room, softening the edges of the man's face as he leaned closer. Amy could hear the gentle crackle of the flame, a comforting sound that contrasted sharply with her growing unease. His voice was smooth, a velvety undertone that wrapped around her like a warm blanket, making her heart race in a way she couldn't quite place. Each word slid off his tongue like syrup, laced with promises that tantalized her weary soul. "You deserve someone who sees you for who you really are," he said, his eyes glistening in the dim light. Too often people overlook the treasures, hidden beneath the surface. Amy felt a pleasant warmth bloom in her chest, the words rolling over her like an embrace. They echoed the longings she dared not voice herself, the desire for validation, for someone to recognize the intricate patterns of her thoughts and feelings. But as she hung on his every word, a little voice in the back of her mind began to stir. She wondered why someone like him would be drawn to her. A glimmer of doubt flickered like the flame before them. Surely, there must be a catch. Yet, the more he spoke, the more the trepidation faded into an enticing allure. "Your passion for painting is extraordinary," he continued, leaning back with a satisfied smile, as if she were the masterpiece in a gallery he couldn't get enough of. Amy's cheeks flushed at the compliment, and she momentarily lost herself in a memory of her brush gliding across the canvas, the vibrant colors flowing out like her very soul. "Art is how I breathe," she replied wistfully, caught up in the moment. "It's my way of understanding the world." "Exactly," he exclaimed, his enthusiasm almost jarring. "And understanding is a rare commodity these days. So many people merely exist, lost in the chaos of their lives." But as she listened, a flicker of unease crept back. His interest felt too intense, too complicated, like a web being spun tighter around her, ensnaring her in soft, lyrical phrases. With every compliment, he dismantled her defenses piece by piece, unveiling vulnerabilities she had safeguarded for so long. She caught herself mirroring his smile, but beneath that facade, something was brewing, an instinct telling her to tread carefully. His hand brushed against hers, the contact sending a small shiver through her, but what caught her off guard was the way his touch felt almost calculated, as if he were gauging the power he held over her. She wanted to believe in the honesty of his flattery, to immerse herself in the light he seemed to offer. Yet, there was a shadow looming above them, and though it remained unspoken, Amy sensed it, lurking just outside the warm glow of the candle. As the conversation flowed, she couldn't shake off the growing disparity between the sweetness of his words and the chill whispering through the cracks of her mind. The deception was weaving itself into the fabric of their interaction, and the more she ignored it, the more entangled she became in his charade. The moon hung low in the sky, a Cheshire grin framed by the wisps of clouds that drifted aimlessly. Shadows danced uncertainly across the walls as Alex moved through the empty hallways of the once welcoming mansion that now felt like a prison. Each creak of the floorboards beneath his feet echoed the burgeoning dread that settled heavily in his gut. He had her right where he wanted her, and as the days turned into weeks, he couldn't help but admire how seamlessly she had slipped into his deceptive world. That trust he had so carefully cultivated was now his greatest weapon, sharper than any blade. Late-night conversations that started with laughter now threaded through silence thick with tension. Seated across from one another, she would search his eyes, looking for the sincerity that had first drawn her to him. Instead, the reflection she found was a jagged mirror of half-truths and calculated lies. Yet, she clung to moments of euphoria, believing that perhaps the darkness that loomed would fade, leaving only the remnants of their shared laughter. But shadows are persistent, and they creep in when least expected. Alex was no longer just the charming companion who spun tales of adventure. He had become an architect of desolation, constructing a reality where she was bound by her own misplaced faith. Each sweet whisper, once laced with comfort, now echoed with an unsettling undercurrent that she refused to acknowledge. The facade he maintained was unraveling, and like a watchman gone blind to the slipping sands of time, her clarity had slipped through her fingers. Then, the fateful night arrived, shrouded in a thick fog that obscured her vision and clouded her judgment. It was during one of those cold, suffocating evenings that the truth erupted like a volcano, spilling molten shards of despair into her life. In his eyes, she saw a darkness that twisted her understanding of who he had been. The very walls that once felt like sanctuaries now closed in, suffocating her in a swirl of betrayal. After that night, reality warped into a grotesque reflection of normalcy. Instead of falling asleep in a cocoon of safety, her nights grew interminable. Sleep twisted into circles of anxiety and dread. Her days became mere echoes of existence. She wandered through the mansion, feeling the weight of solitude seep through her bones as if the walls themselves were conspiring against her sanity. Each corner held a fragment of what used to be, a cruel reminder of lost innocence. The loneliness consumed her, a black hole from which escape seemed impossible. Like a marionette with severed strings, she floated through encounters with others, their voices mere whispers in the wind. The isolation was thick, a miasma that choked her from within. No solace in sunlight, no comfort in kindness. She was ensnared, unable to seek help or confide in a world that seemed distant and indifferent to her plight. In those dark hours, she wondered if anyone would ever notice her absence, or if she would simply fade into the very shadows that had come to define her existence. The weeks that followed the revelation brought about an emotional tempest unlike anything she had ever known. Each day felt like an uphill struggle laden with memories that tied her back to that fateful night. The echoes of laughter and joy had been replaced by a haunting silence, as if the world outside had chosen to turn a blind eye to her turmoil. Each morning, When she caught her reflection in the mirror, the signs of her pregnancy were more than just physical. They resonated with the weight of choices made and paths taken. With every small change in her body, the reality of her situation made its presence known, an ever-looming shadow reminding her of the fragility of hope and despair intertwined. She found herself wandering through the streets, lost in thoughts that spiraled out of control, thinking of all the ways her life had veered off course. How could the world continue to spin when her own seemed irreparably broken? Friends who had offered comfort at first now seemed distant and unsure of how to approach her without stirring up the storm of emotions beneath her skin. The walls of isolation began to close in, and yet she was determined to carve a path forward. Her child was counting on her. One afternoon, she found her way to a park, a serene escape from the turmoil within. Here, mothers and their children played, laughter filling the air, an excited symphony of innocence. She watched them, a heart-wrenching mix of longing and resolve washing over her. It struck her how love could be both a tremendous burden and an uplifting force, intertwining themselves in a dance as old as time. This child, so innocent and pure, would not be tainted by the circumstances of their beginning. She vowed to shield this little life from the darkness that had enveloped her, to nurture it with the love she had yet to find for herself. Over time, she began to seek solace in the small things, crafting a quiet world that revolved around her pregnancy. She spent evenings listening to the soft thrum of music, choosing melodies that spoke of new beginnings and unbroken dreams. Each note became a mantra, a way to weave positivity into the tapestry of her existence. As she would lay her hands on her growing belly, a sense of peace would wash over her, as if the child could feel her intentions seeping through, an unspoken promise that life would flourish despite the pain. Yet, the emotional scars wouldn't vanish so easily. In moments of solitude, grief would creep back in, leaving her feeling fractured and raw. The memories of that night peeled back layers of vulnerability she didn't realize still existed. The anger would sometimes flare inside her, directed not at the child, but at the very circumstances that had led them to this moment. In those dark hours, she reminded herself that she could not choose their beginning, but she could mold their future. Slowly, she embraced the life growing inside her, a testament to resilience amid chaos. This child would carry a legacy of strength, a symbol of finding light where darkness once reigned. Each kick and flutter served as both a reminder of the past and a beacon illuminating a path forward, one that would not define her by tragedy, but empower their futures with tenacity and love. As months passed, her spirit began to rekindle, the flickering flame of hope slowly transforming into something brighter, more potent, a guiding star leading her through the shadows into the dawn. As she cradled her newborn daughter against her chest, the warmth of the infant's tiny body seemed to ignite a flicker of hope deep within her. The room, stark and uninviting, felt somehow softer in this moment, the muted colors and dim light dissolving around them. For the first time in years, the heaviness of despair that had shadowed her life began to lift, replaced by the pure, unadulterated bond that flowed between mother and child. The little girl, with a tuft of dark hair and delicate fingers, breathed softly, each exhale reassuring her mother that the world still held the capacity for beauty. They were alone in that moment, just the two of them, but the solitude was a comfort rather than a burden. It allowed her to absorb the reality of motherhood, a role she was determined to approach with fervor and purpose. With every gentle coo from her daughter, visions of a future unfolded before her eyes, ones filled with laughter, adventures, and the profound joy of watching a child grow. She envisioned afternoons spent in the park, with her laughter ringing out against a backdrop of trees swaying in the gentle breeze. She dreamed of teaching her daughter how to ride a bicycle, her little feet pedaling furiously until she found her balance, a metaphor for the life lessons she longed to impart. Yet, with those sweet images came the shadows of her past, the struggle of poverty, the sting of betrayal, and the haunting whispers of doubt that nagged at her heart. She knew the world could be unforgiving, ruthless even, and she was all too aware of how quickly innocence could be tarnished. Every time she imagined the life she wanted for her daughter, she felt the weight of her own history tugging at her, a grim reminder of the battles she had fought and the resilience she had cultivated over the years. Determined not to let her past dictate their future, she vowed to shield her daughter from the harsh realities that had once engulfed her. She would cultivate a home where love was the foundation, where kindness reigned, and where her daughter could blossom unfettered by fear or despair. Nights were often a cacophony of worries, but now she found solace in her child's peaceful slumber. She spent those quiet hours dreaming up stories of courage and adventure to share, of heroes who stood tall against adversity, instilling within her daughter the belief that she could be anything she wanted to be. As days turned into weeks, the bond deepened. They ventured into the community, meeting kind souls who offered their support, individuals who had risen from their own ashes and now spread warmth wherever they went. With gentle encouragement, her new friends helped her see the world through brighter lenses. Each small victory, whether it was a smile exchanged or a compliment received about her daughter, peeled away layers of fear and doubt, revealing the vibrant tapestry of possibility that lay before them. Love flourished in their modest abode, and with every passing minute, she discovered that this was not just the beginning of her daughter's life. It was the birth of a new narrative, one of resilience, joy, and a fierce, unwavering hope. As the sun rose each morning, casting a warm, golden hue over their small, cluttered apartment, the girl, now a mother, would awaken to the soft sound of her daughter's giggles. Those laughter-filled moments, fleeting yet infinite, were the precious comfort that soothed her weary heart. The world outside was unkind, filled with an endless grind of bills, responsibilities, and uncertainties. But within those four walls, they had built a sanctuary, a fortress of joy where dreams could flutter freely. The days occasionally blended into one another, a continuous loop of challenges that tested her resolve. Every morning she would sift through her old clothes, a silent negotiation with herself. What could be sacrificed for food on the table? What could still hold her dignity? Each decision weighed on her, but she bore it all with resilience. Her daughter was a beacon of hope. The way her eyes sparkled when she would spot a butterfly or hear a dog bark made the struggles feel light, as though they were merely ripples in the vast ocean of life. They learned to find joy in the simplest of things. A walk in the park took on an adventure-like quality. Her daughter would pick flowers, calling each one a different name, as if they were characters in a never-ending story. She would concoct fascinating tales of brave knights and magical lands, weaving their reality into fantasy, making it rich with possibility. In those moments, the girl could almost forget about the mounting rent and the empty pantry. It was enough to see her daughter's imagination unfurl like the petals of the wildflowers they had gathered. Yet, the shadows of despair would occasionally sneak in. There were nights when the girl would sit on the edge of her bed, heart heavy with worry about tomorrow's meal. She would remind herself of the countless times she had triumphed over difficulty, how she had weathered storms and emerged with even more fervor to give her daughter a better life. The thought of her little one, oblivious to the struggles, gave her the courage to keep pushing forward. Their bond deepened in silence, forged not just from shared laughter, but also from their unspoken understanding of adversity. The girl often found solace in her daughter's presence. Even when the days were dark and hard, her daughter's curiosity and boundless enthusiasm were infectious. They would huddle together during cold nights, sharing stories under a hand-me-down blanket that had seen better days, wrapped in warmth and love that outshone their material lack. Every bounced ball outside, every child's laughter they heard, acted as a reminder of what they were striving for. Their little world, vibrant and humming with their hopes and dreams, became an unbreakable fortress built not on luxury, but on love and determination. Through every struggle, they painted their lives with strokes of resilience, with colors drawn from the palette of their shared experiences, creating a masterpiece of perseverance that only they could understand. As she stood in the clearing, surrounded by the rustle of leaves and the distant whisper of the wind, the familiar weight of her past pressed down on her like an unrelenting fog. The sunlight filtered through the branches, casting dappled shadows onto the ground, but no amount of warmth could penetrate the chill that gripped her heart. Holding a handful of mushrooms she had just foraged, she stood frozen when a voice broke the stillness. "Anna?" She turned slowly, her blood running cold at the sight of him. There he was, the man who once turned her world upside down, standing before her with an air of casual confidence that sent a shiver down her spine. Time had sculpted his features into something rugged but familiar. The way his eyes gleamed with a flicker of mischief despite the lines etched around them told her that he hadn't changed entirely. "Michael," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. The name fell from her lips like a stone, heavy with years of regret, anger, and the bittersweet echoes of their shared history. Memories rushed forward unbidden, the laughter, the passion, and ultimately the betrayal that had shattered their lives. It was all there, hovering just beneath the surface, waiting for the chance to engulf her entirely. He took a step closer, his hands raised in an uncharacteristic gesture of peace. "It's been a long time. How have you been? I've thought about you, about us, often." Each word was a dagger, the intent behind them wrapped in a cloak of nostalgia, but to her, they were reminders of a life she thought she had put behind her. The mention of us made her heart constrict in her chest. The man standing before her was not the one she remembered. He was older, wearier, yet still wielded the charm that had once captivated her. "Why are you here?" she snapped, her voice gaining strength despite her trembling insides. "What do you want?" He hesitated, the confident smile dropping slightly as he searched her face for an answer. "I came to see how you were doing. I heard about your daughter. She's gotten quite big, hasn't she? She must look a lot like you." Her daughter. The thought of Sophia drew a protective instinct that swelled within her, igniting her anger. "Leave my daughter out of this. You don't get to talk about her, not after everything." Michael's expression shifted, a flicker of hurt crossing his features. But she wasn't swayed. She had fought too hard to build a new life, to create a safe space for herself and her little girl free from his shadows. He sighed, weariness creeping into his voice. "I know I don't have the right, but I just want to understand why things went wrong. I never meant to hurt you." His sincerity, or what she assumed was an attempt at sincerity, only stoked the fire within her. It wasn't about understanding or closure. It was about the choices he had made that had propelled her into a world of pain and loss. "You didn't just hurt me," she said fiercely. "You changed the course of my entire life. You can't just barge back in and act like nothing happened." The air between them buzzed with unresolved tension and unspoken words, the ghosts of their past colliding with the present. Anna felt tears prick at her eyes, a painful mix of emotions threatening to break her carefully maintained facade. She fought against it, unwilling to give in. The past had a way of resurfacing, but she wasn't going to let it swallow her whole again. Not today. She stood in the fading light of the day, her heart racing as she replayed his words in her mind like a broken record. "I want to be part of your lives." As if he had the right to make such a statement after all that had transpired. The words hung in. The air, heavy with the weight of their implications, suffocating her with memories both bitter and sweet. Her daughter's laughter echoed in her ears, a tender reminder of the innocent joy that now seemed under threat. When he had walked back into her life, it was like a haunting resurrection of old wounds she had painstakingly stitched and bandaged over the years. The anger stirred within her, a furnace ignited by the audacity of the man who had shattered her world once. He had left without a backward glance, vanishing into the shadows of her past, and now, uninvited, he stood at the threshold of her present. She had fought through grief, learned to navigate the turbulent waters of single motherhood, only to find him resurfacing like some specter, demanding a place at their table. The storm within her raged, a tempest of conflicting emotions. Love for her daughter surged like a tidal wave, fierce and protective. She could not allow his mere desire for redemption to endanger the sanctuary she had created for her child. The air thickened with unspoken words, each one pulsing with the energy of their shared history. She felt the tug of those old feelings, glimpses of who they once were, yet she hardened her resolve. He could not be allowed to breach the fragile walls she had built to keep the remnants of his past from bleeding into her future. Memories fluttered like moths to a flame, casting shadows of doubt that flickered around her. She remembered their shared dreams, the promises whispered late into the night, the way their hands intertwined with effortless ease. But soon, those dreams had turned to nightmares, cascading into a wellspring of rage and betrayal that had almost consumed her. She had clawed her way back, piece by fragile piece, and the scars he left behind were now a part of her armor. Yet beneath the anger and fear, a flicker of something more complicated surfaced, a ghost of affection that warred with the reality of the present. Could he truly wish to know their daughter, to amend his past mistakes? Or was this just another manipulation, a siren song meant to drown her in hopes and illusion? The thought twisted in her gut, a familiar ache she thought she'd buried. As she looked into her daughter's trusting eyes, she felt a pang of guilt. She had successfully shielded her from the man who had caused her so much pain, but at what cost? Could she be condemning them both to a lifetime of unanswered questions by denying this encounter? The battle raged in her mind, a cacophony of self-doubt and defiance, demanding she choose between love and protection. That moment, suspended in time, stretched longer than the day itself. And amid the chaos, one solid truth emerged. She would fight tooth and nail to protect the life they had carved out together. No matter the storm he brought with his arrival, her daughter's happiness would remain her North Star. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains, casting a soft glow across the room. She stirred awake, her mind instantly flooded with the weight of her decision. The previous night had been a torrent of emotion, a painful peeling back of layers she had spent years trying to heal. Could she truly entertain the idea of allowing him back into their lives? As she stared at the ceiling, she thought of hope and dread, battling it out within her. Her daughter, blissfully unaware of the turmoil churning in her mother's heart, giggled from the other room, playing with her toys, each sound punctuating the reality of her innocence. It was this innocence that carved at her resolve, reminding her of all she wanted to protect. The very idea of her daughter developing a bond with a man who had left indelible scars on her own spirit felt like dancing on the edge of a razor. Over the past few weeks, she had immersed herself in conversations with friends, seeking a semblance of clarity. They offered varied perspectives. Some urged compassion, believing that years could lead to transformation, while others warned of the danger of past appetites resurfacing. Yet even among their well-meaning chatter, she found her heart returning to a fundamental truth. No one could understand the depth of her suffering and the struggle to rebuild from the ruins he had left behind. Today, she decided, would not be about the past, but about defining the future. With a heavy heart, she set about preparing for the meeting. Her hands trembled slightly as she got ready. How remarkable! that she now felt like a stranger in her own skin, someone caught between hasty recklessness and cautious trust. Each brush of her hair was met with fierce determination. She would face him and not retreat into the shame that had followed her for so long. The designated cafe had long been a favorite haunt of theirs, a place where she had once reveled in sweet promises and laughter. It felt wrong and surreal to be returning, memories layered thick like dust on old shelves. She arrived early, each ticking second, amplifying her anxiety, drowning her in the thoughts of his possible words, his anticipated actions. Would he be contrite? Would he see the hurt reflected in her eyes, the burden of the years he had stolen from their lives? The door chimed as he entered, a sound that resonated so oddly familiar yet filled with an undercurrent of unfamiliarity. He looked different, older, perhaps a bit worn around the edges, but his eyes sparkled with that same hesitant hope that had always flickered whenever he wanted something from her. As they locked gazes, she swallowed her fear, standing firm against the echo of their shared history, ready to lay bare not just her feelings, but her resolve as well. "Let's talk," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. No preamble, no small talk, just the unvarnished truth that had to be laid on the table. She could almost hear her heart beating against her chest as he nodded, the gravity of the moment settling heavily between them, the weight of the silence wrapped around them, thick and suffocating. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what needed to be said. "You don't understand what it felt like," she began, her voice trembling slightly, but gathering strength with each word. "Every time you made a promise, I held on to it like a lifeline, only to watch you let it slip away, like sand through my fingers. I don't know if you can even grasp the depth of that hurt." His eyes, once so vibrant, now held shadows, echoes of late-night regrets and early morning realizations. He could see the lines of pain etched on her face, deeper than any physical scar. The heartache that had carved its way into her demeanor spoke louder than any argument they'd ever had, louder than his own guilt. He wanted nothing more than to reach out, to bridge the chasm created by his actions, but he was afraid. Afraid of saying the wrong thing, of reopening wounds that were still seeping. "I waited," she continued, emotions crashing over her like waves against a rocky shore. "I waited through the silence, through the excuses, hoping you would step up and finally be the person you promised me you'd be. But you didn't. You chose to see me as someone who would always be there, someone whose heart wouldn't shatter into a million pieces. I thought love meant fighting for one another, but it seems like you were fighting for anything but us." The air between them crackled with the intensity of her words. He felt the weight of her pain pressing upon him, and for the first time, he fully acknowledged his part in this destructive cycle. 1,000 apologies swirled in his mind, but in the face of her raw honesty, he found himself mute. What could he say? How could he possibly justify the choices he had made without sounding like he was deflecting the blame? "Do you even realize what your actions have cost us?" Her voice softened slightly, revealing a vulnerable side that she rarely displayed. "I've spent countless nights wondering if I wasn't enough, wondering if I would ever really matter to you. All those moments I held you in my heart, picturing a future that now feels impossible. The reality is, I am tired. Tired of trying to salvage something that feels increasingly one-sided." He felt his heart clench at her words, understanding in a way he hadn't before. It was as if her pain had carved a path through the confusion that had obscured his vision for too long. In that moment, he let his guard down, allowing guilt to flood through him. But what surged alongside it was a flicker of hope. If he could truly see her, really see her, maybe he could find a way to make amends. But the question lingered like a specter in the air. Could he ever really earn her trust back? As their eyes locked, something shifted in the atmosphere between them, a mutual recognition of a choice. Perhaps it was a seed of redemption, or perhaps an ominous hint of a wound too deep to heal. Only time would tell if they would tread the path toward reconciliation or remain forever bound to despair. As they sat across from each other at the small cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air, the tension that had typically hovered between them began to dissipate, albeit slowly. Each sip was a tentative step into unfamiliar territory. She felt her heart race as he began to open up, peeling back the layers of mistrust she had built around herself like armor. His voice, once sharp and defensive, now held a hint of vulnerability that was both unexpected and disarming. "I've made mistakes," he admitted, his gaze dropping to the table. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and full of unspoken truths. "I never wanted to hurt anyone, but I wasn't in a good place." He spoke of his childhood, of a home fraught with chaos, where love was conditional and silence often replaced affection. As he unraveled this tapestry of his past, she felt a stir of empathy surging within her, surprising herself with the openness she was willing to extend. "I get it," she found herself saying, the words spilling forth before she could reconsider. "You don't have to carry that burden alone anymore." There was an honesty in their exchange that felt transformative, as if the very air around them had shifted, allowing for the possibility of something new, a connection beyond their shared history, forged in the chrysalis of understanding. The conversation meandered toward their child, the small life that lay between them like a fragile thread. The mention of co-parenting stirred a mix of hope and anxiety within her. Could they really chart a course together, navigating the murky waters of their fractured relationship for the sake of their child? The thought felt both daunting and exhilarating. She envisioned weekends spent laughing together at the park, holidays marked by laughter and warmth, and a semblance of normalcy that had once seemed so far out of reach. He stared at her, seeking reassurance. "Do you think we could actually make it work?" The earnestness in his eyes tugged at her heart. It was a risk, a leap into the unknown, but something about his openness made her consider it seriously. She nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. "I think we can try, for them." The words tasted like a promise, both fragile and powerful. The discussion shifted to logistics, shared calendars, routines, and boundaries. Each detail felt monumental, a building block towards a potential future they had both once feared was unattainable. As plans began to take shape, a strange sense of camaraderie formed between them, a unifying goal that transformed their past grievances into tools for constructive dialogue. The path ahead was still fraught with uncertainty. The echoes of their disagreements lingered like shadows on the walls. Yet, for the first time in a long while, she felt the flicker of hope igniting within. The promise of possibility stretched out before them, guiding them toward a joint endeavor that was no longer about their failures, but about the future of the child they both loved. Together, they could begin to weave a new narrative, one filled with compassion, renewed trust, and perhaps even a shared joy that had been long obscured. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, she took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment. The weight of the dialogue they had shared lingered in the air, a blend of apprehension and tentative optimism. He sat across from her, his gaze fixed on the table, the surface marred by coffee stains and the remnants of their previous encounters, symbolic of the messy history they had shared. In that moment, it felt as though they were both standing on the precipice of something fragile, a new understanding teetering between them, waiting for the slightest breeze to either nurture it into fruition or send it cascading into oblivion. With each shared silence, the thoughts coursed through her mind like a tidal wave. Hesitation coiled tightly around her heart, trust, an elusive ghost in the shadows of their past. Yet, something in her stirred, an ember, a flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, they could navigate the minefield of emotions that had plagued them for so long. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. The old wounds were still exposed, raw and pulsing with memories of disappointment and betrayal. But as she observed him, a mixture of determination and vulnerability etched across his features. She felt a shift within herself, a burgeoning willingness to explore the path laid out before them. "Let's start small," he said, breaking the silence, his voice steady yet gentle, as if testing the waters. "I know I can't undo the past, but I want to earn your trust. I want you to feel safe." The sincerity in his words washed over her, a gentle wave that both comforted and scared her. His desire to change was palpable, but it was still uncharted territory, and fear curled around her thoughts like ivy, grasping at her resolve. "I don't want promises," she replied, her voice unwavering despite the tremor of uncertainty beneath it. "I need actions. I need space to figure this out at my own pace." The girl could feel the weight of her words landing between them, solidifying her boundaries, yet she hoped he would understand the vulnerability encased within them. Trust could not be rushed. It was a delicate dance, one that required both partners to move in harmony, slowly crafting a rhythm that felt comforting rather than chaotic. He nodded, his expression a blend of relief and understanding. "I can do that. I'm ready to take the steps with you, even if they're small." The sincerity in his eyes struck a chord in her, and she found herself longing to believe him, to embrace the possibility of healing. As they continued to talk, exploring the contours of their intentions and setting the very foundations of their agreement, she felt a strange connection start to weave its way back between them. It was tentative, fraught, but electric, like the first signs of spring after a long winter. She couldn't shake the trepidation, but the flicker of hope ignited a desire to move forward, together in this uncertain yet transformative journey. As they settled into this delicate but hopeful new rhythm, each day seemed to unfold into a tapestry woven with small, significant moments. The weekend school fair was a vibrant splash of color against the backdrop of their settled lives. He arrived early, eager not only to please her, but to genuinely feel the pulse of this new family adventure. Clad in a faded t-shirt boasting the local sports team, he helped his daughter set up her booth, his laughter mingling with hers as they hung handmade decorations. In that laughter, she began to hear the echoes of the man she had fallen for, a sound she had despaired of ever hearing again. As the day progressed, her heart swelled as she watched him interact with the other parents. He was charming and warm, effortlessly easing into conversations, sharing stories that revealed his quick wit, and even offering a helping hand to those who were struggling with oversized balloons or unruly clipboards. She felt a tremor of pride mingled with a flicker of disbelief. Could this really be the same man who once had been a shadow of himself, lost in his own turmoil? Their daughter beamed as she showed off her art project, an illustration of a fantastical creature she had imagined. She was thriving, and the positivity radiating from her was infectious. As she jumped from one activity to another, her laughter ringing clear like a bell, the realization dawned on her that they were building something new together, a sense of belonging that had felt impossible just months ago. After the fair, they returned home, their daughter blissfully exhausted and recounting every detail of her day. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions and engaging in the recounting as though he were hearing an epic saga rather than a child's recount of school activities. As the night wore on, they snuggled together under a blanket on the couch, their daughter nestled between them. He brushed his fingers through her hair, a casual yet intimate gesture that sent warmth flooding through her. Days turned into routines, each one a new layer in the structure they were erecting. They cooked together, a mix of chatter and playful nudges, filling the kitchen as they prepared dinners. He would attempt her favorite dishes, a spark of determination igniting behind his eyes, and find joy in the little victories. The way the garlic sizzled in the pan and transformed the air into a warm embrace. They shared silly moments, plays on words and laughter that felt richer as they began to unearth the depths of their history. Still, the undercurrent of their past lingered, a reminder of the work still ahead. Yet, as they spent more time together, navigating simple chores and the complexities of parenthood, the shadows began to dissipate. She caught herself dreaming about a future, their future, one filled with laughter, a love rekindled, and a family forged anew. Trust was no longer an elusive concept. She could see it being rebuilt, one beautiful moment at a time. Each flicker of connection was a testament to their determination, subtly crafted in love, patience, and the shared dreams of tomorrow. As the days turned into weeks, the girl found herself immersed in a quiet introspection that allowed her to peel away the layers of pain she had been harboring for far too long. She spent long evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the neighborhood. Each sunset felt like a gentle reminder that endings could also usher in new beginnings. With each passing day, the mental weight of resentment began to lighten, revealing a path she had never truly considered, that of actively choosing to let go. Forgiveness, she discovered, was not a single act, but a process, one that unfolded gradually, like the petals of a flower. Each time she revisited the past, she no longer felt the same sting. Instead, she started to see the moments of vulnerability in her former partner that had long eluded her recognition. It was as if the fog had lifted, and she could finally perceive the fragment of humanity within him. The young man who once held dreams and fears, just like everyone else. In this softer perspective, she began to make space for empathy, an emotion that had felt foreign to her during the throes of heartache. The little girl, their daughter, became a bridge between them. The girl often watched as her daughter played in their modest backyard, her laughter echoing through the air like a sweet melody. In those joyous moments, she felt a swell of gratitude for the life they had created together, however imperfect. The child was a living testament to the connection that once bound her to him, a bond that, while frayed, had not entirely unraveled. This realization ignited a flicker of compassion within her, grounding her resolve to forgive not just for her daughter's sake, but for her own. No longer did she wish to be a prisoner of her past. She began to appreciate the choices she had made, each one steered by the fervent desire to seek a brighter future. Every instance of shared laughter with her daughter became a strand, woven into the tapestry of hope she envisioned for them both. It wasn't naivete that pushed her to forgive. It was a determined act of self-liberation. She understood that holding on to bitterness only served to imprison her heart. The girl also recognized that forgiveness wasn't necessarily about turning back the clock or rekindling old ties. It was about accepting the reality of the situation, accepting the flaws in others, and, most importantly, in herself. With this acceptance came a quiet dignity. She no longer felt the need to shout her pain from the rooftops. Instead, she learned the art of quiet resilience, of moving forward with her head held high, illuminated by the understanding that while her past defined her, it did not dictate her future. In the soft glow of the dusk, as stars began to twinkle in the deepening sky, she whispered a silent vow to herself. She would nurture this burgeoning sense of peace, allowing it to seep into every corner of her life. Forgiveness had already begun to show her the way, and she was ready to follow. The laughter of children intertwined with the distant sound of a lawnmower, creating a symphony of summer that echoed through the backyard. She took a moment to absorb the sight around her, a kaleidoscope of bright colors and joyful faces. The balloons bobbed gently in the warm breeze, and the picnic table sagged under the weight of a vibrant cake, decorated with a wild array of sprinkles. Her daughter's giggles rang clear, a string of pearls shimmering in the sunlight as she chased after her friends, their laughter like a sweet melody that wrapped around her heart. In that moment, she felt a soothing warmth spread through her chest, a familiar yet forgotten sensation. It was the feeling of belonging, of having risen from the ashes of past struggles to stand in this beautiful reality. The journey to this moment had not been easy. It had been riddled with uncertainty, fear, and wounds that ran deep. Yet here she was, witnessing the joy of her daughter in a celebration that echoed her own resilience. Time had indeed shifted. Each tick of the clock had carved a new path, smoothing the jagged edges left by heartache. Her thoughts drifted back to earlier years when shadows loomed larger than life. Each step forward had felt like an uphill battle, a struggle against tides of despair. But with every challenge, she had learned to awaken the light buried within her, nurturing hope that flickered like a candle flame in the darkest of nights. Now the spark had transformed into a powerful blaze, illuminating the lives of those around her. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the gathering. She joined her daughter by the swings, pushing her gently. The laughter of the little girl filled her with an indescribable joy, echoing to the deepest corners of her heart. It was a song of triumph, a celebration of the many battles fought and won. Each swing was a testament to letting go. Every kick back was a gentle nudge toward future possibilities. Family and friends began to gather near, each smile a reminder of the tapestry they had woven together, a fabric rich with love, support, and shared memories. Every story shared, every tear shed had bound them tighter, forging connections that would withstand any storm. She glanced around, her heart swelling with gratitude, as she recognized the faces that had journeyed beside her, who had held her hand through thick and thin. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and soft lavender, she took a deep breath, inhaling the sweet fragrance of blooming flowers. She was no longer the girl caught in the clutch of despair. She was a mother, a sister, a friend, a beacon of hope for others who might find themselves lost in their own darkness. She smiled, fully present in this moment of joy, knowing life had bestowed upon her the greatest gift of all, the strength to rise, to embrace each day anew, and to cherish the love that blossomed around her like the flowers in full bloom.